Good morning. How are you? Kabisa. Habari zenu?
Nzuri sana.
Karibu hapa. Asante.
Karibu.
The head of state is fully aware of this significant national exercise and he acknowledges the collective efforts being made towards enhancing productivity in the public sector. The Kenya Vision 2030 recognizes that Kenya's main potential lies in its people. That is, we are talking about their creativity, work ethic, education, their entrepreneurial and other skills. The vision opines that one of the main challenges is the need to carry out an assessment on the productivity level across all sectors and productivity growth. Looking at the ballooning wage bill, which currently stands out at 46% of the ordinary revenue, this is against a recommended standard where we should be operating at 35%. This one actually exerts more pressure on the government expenditure, which is bringing now challenges to us. To address this challenge, the productivity enhancement in the public sector is one of the measures that the government has put in place. The productivity gains are expected to enable our economy to drive to produce more for the same amount of inputs. So once we are operating at that level, then we'll be able to have our economy producing more at the same amount of inputs, or to also consume less to produce the same amount for the same amount of output. In other words, we say you spend less to produce more. So this training, I believe it will form part of the critical public sector reforms, which is geared towards what we have already discussed, operational efficiency, which talks about minimizing operational costs. At the same time, it's also geared towards labor efficiency, which talks about improving labor productivity in this country. And lastly, it's talking about customer satisfaction, whereby we create efficiency in terms of customers getting, or the consumers getting, the right service. Here we have a productivity mainstreaming training technical committee, and that's where the facilitators have been drawn from. The committee comprises of, the committee is spearheaded by the State Department for Cabinet Affairs, that's our State Department, joined by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission and the National Productivity and Competitiveness Council from the State Department of Labor and Skills. Then we also have the State Department for Performance and Delivery Manager Progress in alignment with our action plan, and that's why the 20th cycle of performance contracting guidelines talks about productivity mainstreaming. In the 20th cycle, all MDAs are required to develop productivity metrics, collect data on the same, analyze and compute productivity index. This informs in this training that which is undertaken across the country for a period of 3 weeks. So the reason as to why we have initiated this exercise is we want those participants to learn how to go about developing productivity metrics, collection of data, and also analyze and compute the productivity. In parts after this, they'll also be expected to do what we call develop productivity metrics, which is to address the question of elements of productivity, that is quality, cost, and delivery. As I've said also, we also need to do collection of data on the same, analyze and compute productivity index. And lastly, you're also expected to design a productivity improvement strategy in your institutions. As participants, I implore each of you to be champions of productivity mainstreaming within your respective MDAs, so your proactive involvement will not only elevate your individual capacities, but will also play a pivotal role in our collective vision. As you have said, I'm expecting all of you, after this session, you become the champions of productivity mainstreaming, and we will be following up. So it's our humble request that you help us in moving this wheel forward. Statistics has it that, as we are told, that we are operating at 14%, at 14,000, sorry, while countries such as Egypt are operating at 62,000. So, which means we are still, Egypt is one of the countries that, all of the developed countries in Africa, that is, I think in terms of GDP nominal, they are heading, I think they are number one, number two. So in terms of development, that is, we are referring to Egypt, maybe we are making Egypt as a reference point in Africa, but if you look at that disparity or that difference is huge, which means maybe there is surplus in terms of what we are doing, maybe in terms of cost we are overspending, maybe in terms of human resource there is wastage, and that's why the output is not felt. So it's upon us now to be champions of that productivity mainstreaming and take serious this training so that we'll be able to help in developing a productivity metric that which is key in achieving our objective.
My name is Jane Maina. I am from the State Department for Labor and Skills Development, a department known as the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center. The 20th cycle of the PC 2023-2024 has factored in productivity mainstreaming as one of the productivity agenda, and the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center has been identified as the specialized agency spearheading the productivity agenda. Nevertheless, a single department is unable to drive productivity in the country, and therefore this has taken a multi-agency approach where we have the State Department for Cabinet Affairs, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, and the Performance Management Department in the Public Service. And the whole agenda of driving productivity is in the realization that the country has been delivering outputs, but at extraordinary costs. So the whole conversation on productivity is revolving around at what cost are we producing the goods and services for consumption by our citizens. So the ultimate aim in this national drive is to reduce costs in operation, is to promote efficiency in the production of goods and services in this country, and it is being driven from the top office. The metrics are developed, data will be collected, and towards the end of this financial year, organizations in conjunction with the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center will be able to compute their productivity index that is meant to determine the levels of productivity in their organization. After that, we shall be able to develop a productivity improvement strategy in every organization, depending on the gaps that will be identified as far as the productivity metrics are concerned. So that is the ultimate, that's the lineup of the activities, and the ultimate aim of this national agenda is to entrench a culture of productivity in our work ethics, in our work environment, so that we can become productive just like other countries that we are envying in the world. Are talking about the labor productivity of these countries. Labor productivity generally is computed as the GDP of the land divided by the number of employed persons. That means an employed person in Kenya is far less productive compared to an employed person in Egypt, in South Africa, and the country that could be among the top are Singapore, Malaysia, and other countries. So as we compare ourselves with other countries, we are feeling that we need to really improve on our labor productivity, hence the need for this activity that is bringing everybody to understand that we can perform. We can be performing very well, and yet our productivity is very low.